Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. There was an evening so patient that dawn lost its appointment. It spread itself thin across the edges of mountains and the faces of old waters. A soft hush laid over the world like a hand promising, "Not yet." Birds perched inside their own shadows. Rivers slowed to listen to their banks. Even the wind folded itself into the reeds, as if it too wished to be held. People would later call this hour the last. But those who were present knew it was not an end. It was the first world remembering how to sleep. On the plain where grass learned to breathe together, a figure walked without footprints. Her cloak was stitched from the margins of lullabies, her hair the color of bread before it bakes. She was called Miria, though she had been known by other names wherever silence was being taught to rest. In her right hand she held a narrow bell with no clapper. In her left, a book with no letters. Somehow both rang. Miria spoke to the standing stones, to the courtyards, to the wells. "Gather," she said. "Bring me the names you did not have time to finish." The stones hummed. Courtyards brightened with the memory of chairs being pulled a little closer. From the wells, breath rose in slow pearls that did not burst when they reached the air. They assembled in a shallow valley shaped like kindness. There came farmers with the names of rains that never arrived. Mothers with the names of children that had only ever been dreamed. Lovers with the names of promises kept too late to notice. They knelt and set their unfinished syllables upon the earth. Each broken word took the form of a seed, small, matte, patient. Miria walked among them and did not sort by grief or hope. She arranged them by rhythm. "Sleep," she whispered to the seeds. "Become the world you were too tired to be awake." At the heart of the valley a fire burned without appetite, a circle of amber that warmed but did not insist. Around it sat elders who had learned how not to win. They tended the flame the way you tend a story, by listening more than you speak. A child approached Miria, carrying a jar of water that had heard too many goodbyes. "Will the world wake again?" the child asked. Miria knelt to the child's height. "When the last dream is ready to be remembered," she said. "Sleep doesn't cancel morning, teaches it how to arrive." The child poured the water around the fire. The flame lowered itself in gratitude. Miria turned to the gathered ones. "You will walk," she said. "Not away, not toward. Along." A road appeared, not of stone, but of pauses fitted end to end. It curved like a breath across the valley wall and into the hinterlands of dusk. When the first traveler stepped upon it, the road glowed from beneath, as if remembering that footsteps can be gentle. Along the way they passed doorways with no houses, fields with no fences, beds with no pillows. Each absence felt complete, each gap like a chair saved at a long table. The world was making room for itself. They came to a building that occupied the space you get when two people forgive each other at the same time. It had no walls, only shelves that faced one another like courteous mirrors. On them lay books bound in rain, titles embossed by sleep. Miria brought the bell with no clapper to her lips and did not ring it. The room brightened. "Choose a book that already knows you," she said. "Read aloud until the words remember they are breath." A man chose a thin volume titled "The Day I Stopped Explaining Myself." A woman opened "The Sea That Forgot to Be Afraid." The child, finding a book that was only a smooth stone, placed it against her ear and heard her own future laughing. The reading filled the library with tide. When a sentence ended, a wave leaned in softly to say, "Continue." They traveled on until the road reached a river so slow it wore a crown of stars. Miria set the book with no letters upon the water. It did not sink. It taught the river how to carry something without changing it. "This is where the first world lays down its head," she said. "It will rest upon what it has learned." The river bowed its surface to make a pillow. Fields bent their grasses to make blankets. Mountains lowered their shoulders. "Is this death?" someone asked. "No," Miria said. "This is trust." They passed an orchard where each tree cradled a single fruit held cool for someone who would arrive late. Miria touched the bark. "Memory," she said, "is how sweetness respects time." The elders carried baskets of quiet. Children, granted the authority of night, placed the quiet between the roots. The trees sighed the way a body does when finally allowed to uncurl. "We will not harvest," Miria said. "We will remember where the fruit is and come back gently." On a hill stood a house of lamps that had never been lit. Each lamp contained a wick braided from the hair people surrendered when grief asked to be combed. Miria opened the door and the dark of the room lifted its face as if expecting news. "Tonight," she told the lamps, "you will learn that not burning can be a form of light." She invited everyone to sit. They did not light the lamps. They spoke to them. They told the lamps about thresholds crossed slowly, about soup left warming for those who might arrive, about quilts sewn from exclamations no longer needed. The wicks swelled with listening. Their unlit glow held the room like good posture holds a long silence. Sometime between the last story and the first yawn, they stepped into a square where vendors sold only relief. One stall offered clean exits. Another had jars labeled "Keep for later." At the end of the row, a woman with kind hands sold "No longer necessary" by the cup. Miria bought enough for everyone with a coin that looked like permission. They drank. Their shoulders lowered. Some wept without trying to stop. At the fountain, a sign read, "Please rinse the day from your hands before touching anyone." Beside it stood basins and linen and patient benches. No one hurried. They crossed a narrow bridge hung not over water but over a field of small bells. Each bell rang the moment a footfall almost became heavy. Every traveler adjusted in response, and the sound turned into a music of careful steps. The child laughed and danced a pattern that taught the bridge to sing with her. On the far side, Miria touched the rail and the bells went quiet one by one, like stars concluding their shift. They came to a hill where the wind escorted envelopes that had never found their addresses. Miria spread her cloak and the letters arranged themselves upon it like sleeping birds. She read none of them. Instead, she taught everyone to hum the tune that paper hears when ink does not insist on being heard. The letters loosened and dissolved into a weather that entered the lungs and left as gentleness. Somewhere arguments weakened their knees. Somewhere else, a door unlatched without noise. At last they reached the clearing where the first world would sleep. Imagine a bed big enough to hold the horizon without folding it. Imagine pillows stitched from the bravest parts of quiet. Imagine blankets woven from the minutes we lose between two people forgiving each other. The river arranged itself into a cradle around the clearing. The mountains set their shadows like curtains. The sky, removing its last ornament, placed a thin crescent upon the nightstand. Miria opened the book with no letters, and all the blank pages spoke at once. They said, "B. We remember you." Ants held their meetings in a language steady enough to walk on. Mosses wrote the names of the embarrassed in miniature cursive and promised not to tell. A single hinge, proud of its quiet work, asked to creak one last time and was given a moment to do so. Miria invited the little things to offer petitions. Most asked for nothing. A few asked for weather. The petitions were granted. "It is time," Miria said. "Let us sing the song that allows itself to be forgotten." They did not sing. They breathed in the same rhythm until the air learned it. The world took up the breath and made it larger. Houses inhaled slowly, then exhaled their windows into dew. Cats blinked. The moon closed its eyes to listen better. Where the lullaby should have had melody, it had room. Where it should have had words, it had permission. From the river came boats that moved by intention alone. Their oars were made from the quiet side of questions. Miria assigned rowers among the gathered ones. "Not to cross," she said. "To keep time." They rowed in place, and the river agreed. The sound of wood entering water organized the night, giving it a spine that did not need to be seen. The child asked if she could row and was given a boat twice her size. It responded to the dignity of her small hands. One by one, names lay down beside their owners. Not on top of them, not under them. Beside them, like companions who have finally decided to share a pillow. Heavy names became light. Light names grew roots just deep enough to hold. Miria lifted the bell with no clapper and held it above the clearing. If you listened with your bones, you could hear it saying the word enough. Not as request. As blessing. A brightness arrived that refused to be looked at directly. It respected eyes too much for that. It stood at the edge of the clearing and placed its hand upon the air. Every fear that had not known where to go put its head beneath that hand and slept. Miria touched the brightness and did not ask it to stay. She thanked it for visiting. It widened and became an absence the size of a door held open by love. Those who chose to keep watch took seats carved from patience. They promised to do nothing but be there. Miria handed them cups of something warm that gave the mouth the courage to say nothing. The watchers saw foxes visiting the orchard, drinking the cool saved fruit. They saw rain change its mind halfway across the field and go around the clearing as if respecting a sign. They saw a single star fall very slowly and land upon a roof that had needed attention. Nothing was urgent. Everything was in session with the night. The world turned its face to the pillow of river. Grass lay down like hair upon a loved brow. The mountains rested their backs against the dark and let themselves be heavy. Miria closed the book with no letters. She set the bell with no clapper beside it. "Rest," she said to the first world. "We have kept you long enough." The lullaby with no tune deepened. The road of pauses tucked itself in. The lamps rejoiced softly in not being lit. The child leaned against Miria's side. "Will it dream?" she whispered. "Yes," Miria answered. "It will dream us." Before sleep carried them, Miria spoke once more. "When morning returns, it must inherit this gentleness. We vow to remember how to make room. We vow to ask whether for help instead of laws when possible. We vow to put chairs a little closer than comfort would think to place them." The vows wrote themselves in the breath, and the breath stored them where day keeps its best secrets. Every pocket in the clearing produced a key that fit nothing. Miria collected them. She hung them on a string and gave them to the river. "Keep these," she told the water. "When someone forgets they are welcome, return one and let it fit the next door they meet." The river promised in ripples. The keys chimed like laughter in another room. The night lowered its hand over the clearing. Not a lid but a palm. Under it, the first world closed its eyes. You might think such sleeping would shake the earth. Instead, dishes in distant kitchens settled more evenly upon their shelves. A mother, 2 valleys away, woke to find her child already comforted. A city forgot to ring its bells and discovered that dawn could arrive by listening. The last thing anyone heard was Miria saying, "Good," not loudly, so quietly that the word turned into blanket. When they woke, because morning always comes for the ones who are supposed to tend it, they found the road of pauses still warm, the lamps content with their restraint, the doors without houses oriented precisely toward the day. Miria placed the book with no letters into the hands of the child. "Keep this," she said. "It knows when to speak." To the elders she gave the bell with no clapper. "Ring it," she instructed, "by doing something gently." As for the world, it slept on and would for a while. Not forever. Just long enough to dream the kind of morning that would not need to be loud. They left the clearing in pairs, then singly, then in thoughts. Behind them, the river raised the keys to catch the early sun, and the first horizon, sleeping, learned a smile you could feel under your feet. When dawn refused to rise, the river woke instead. It did not sparkle or rush. It simply remembered that it was water. From the place where the first world had lain down to sleep, its breath rolled outward, soft and steady, and the river carried that rhythm into motion. It was not time that flowed there, but recollection. Each ripple was a heartbeat that had once belonged to someone. A lullaby, a promise, a sigh too gentle to become sound. The river did not ask who had sent them. It simply gave them direction. The child from the valley returned, following Miria's footprints. She had not grown older, though the air around her had. She cupped the river in her hands and watched how the reflections moved. "What are they?" she asked. Miria smiled, watching from the reeds. "They are memories that never learned to stay still." "Will they drown?" "No," Miria said softly. "Nothing that breathes like this can ever drown. The river teaches forgetting not as loss, but as motion." The child released the water, and it folded back into the current like forgiveness finding its way home. As they walked along the shore, they came to a field where every stone had an ear. The wind whispered secrets into them, how clouds were born, how silence could make rain shy. Miria knelt by one and placed her palm against its surface. The stone trembled faintly. "It hears the dreams of mountains," she said. "When mountains sleep, their weight becomes listening." The child pressed her own ear against a smaller stone. A hum rose inside her head, low and kind. It was not words, it was the feeling of being understood. "Can they talk back?" she whispered. "Not yet," Miria said. "They are learning to wait before they answer." As the river turned, fog began to bloom across its surface. Within it, shapes appeared, faint outlines of people walking slowly, each carrying something unseen. They were not ghosts. They were unfinished moments. Miria recognized them, the dreams that had stopped halfway through. A woman reaching for someone who had already woken. A bird taking flight but never landing. A word spoken too softly to be heard. They drifted above the water, breathing through the mist. The river murmured beneath them, and one by one, the figures exhaled and became rain. "What happened to them?" the child asked. "They remembered that even unspoken things have meaning," Miria replied. "So they joined the water, to be carried until someone dreams them again." Deeper in the current swam creatures made of reflection. Their scales caught pieces of the sky and rearranged them. Each time one turned, it revealed a different world. A meadow that never wilted. A sky where the constellations still sang. The child leaned forward, mesmerized. "Can they see us?" "They see everything," Miria said, "but they only remember what we forget." She watched one rise close to the surface, its body shimmering with a memory she could almost name. A hand closing around another, a candle being shielded from wind. And then, with a flick, it vanished. That night, Miria dreamed of a bridge that existed beneath the river, woven from old laughter and the sound of pages turning. It connected shores that had never seen each other, and every step upon it created ripples in both directions. When she awoke, she found her feet already wet. The river was glowing, not with light, but with remembrance. She stepped into it, and it rose to meet her like a hand recognizing another. Each footfall was weightless, each ripple a promise. The child called from the bank. "Where does it go?" "To where dreams go when they finish being true," Miria said. They followed the current until it widened into a basin where sound refused to echo. It was a city made of pauses, towers of stone, windows open to the wind. In the center stood fountains that flowed backward, drawing water upward into spirals that whispered in reverse. Here Miria heard words that had already been spoken, but differently, slower, softer, truer. "This is where echoes come to rest," she explained. "When the world grows tired of repeating itself, it listens instead." They sat beside the fountain, and the water began to hum the child's heartbeat back to her. At the base of the fountain, Miria found a hollow reed. When she lifted it, it played itself, a melody without a beginning. She closed her eyes. Each note drew the river's rhythm into her body, until she could feel it, the breathing of the world, deep and slow. "This is what the river remembers," she whispered. "It does not remember faces or names, only how it feels to be kind." The melody bent with the wind, and for a moment, the entire basin shimmered, as though everything had agreed to exhale at once. As night deepened, stars sank low enough to touch the water. Each one carried a dream the world had already forgotten. They did not sparkle. They pulsed, softly, patiently, like hearts in prayer. The child gathered one in her hands. It was warm, but weightless. "What is this one?" Miria smiled. "It's the dream of the first sunrise, the one that knew it was temporary." The child nodded, carefully setting it free. The star floated back to the surface, joining its kin in the patient constellation of the river's breath. When all was quiet again, Miria spoke softly into the dark. "The first world is sleeping," she said. "But sleep is not silence. It is the body's way of remembering without fear." The river swelled gently, and the air grew heavy with the scent of rain that never fell. Miria placed her hand upon the water. It rippled outward, slow, perfect, eternal. And for the first time, the river exhaled. It was the sound of a world learning how to let go. The path to the garden was not made of stone, but of moments. Each step Miria took replayed something small and sacred. A laugh she had forgotten was hers. A leaf she once held as if it could answer her questions. The air shimmered faintly, not from heat, but from memory remembering itself. The child followed close behind, holding a lantern made of quiet. It did not burn. It breathed, and the more still they became, the brighter it glowed. They came to a gate woven from vines of silver light. Each tendril pulsed like a slow heartbeat, and on its arch were carved the words, "Here, what fears the sun learns to dream of it." Miria pressed her hand to the gate. It opened not outward but inward into her own reflection. Within was a vast garden without a horizon. There were no stars, no sky, only drifting light, soft as the echo of a candle seen through tears. Each tree was formed from the shape of something once lost. A friendship, a promise, a name that had slipped from memory. Their leaves were shadows. Their leaves were shadows, but the shadows moved like petals in the wind. The child whispered, "Why does it feel like dusk here?" "Because dusk is when the world forgives itself," Miria said. They walked deeper, their steps leaving ripples in the grass as though it remembered being water. At the heart of the garden stood a figure robed in twilight. Its face was not hidden, yet it could not be seen. A presence more than a form, a silence shaped like compassion. The keeper of the still hour bowed to them. Its voice was the sound of a leaf touching the ground. "Every shadow cast by memory must rest before the next dawn," it said. "Even the darkness grows weary of being misunderstood." Miria lowered her head in reverence. "I seek the place where dreams return to their roots," she said. The keeper gestured to a pool before them, black, calm, endless, reflecting nothing but possibility. "This is where they sleep," it murmured. "But only those who can stand without seeking reflection may enter." Miria knelt beside the pool. In its stillness, she saw herself, but younger, untouched by sorrow. The reflection blinked once, then reached out from the water. "Do you still remember how to be me?" it asked. Miria's heart stilled. Her reflection's voice was her own, gentle, patient, unafraid. "I remember," Miria whispered, "but I've grown heavier." "That is not weight," said the reflection. "It is everything you promised to carry for others." The child stepped closer, watching the two merge and separate again, like two tides learning the same rhythm. "Will she disappear?" the child asked. "No," said the keeper. "She will remember that light and shadow were never meant to fight, only to understand each other." As Miria stood, the pool began to shimmer. From its surface rose flowers made of sleep, their petals woven from sighs, their stems from moments no one had noticed. Each one opened slowly, revealing a soft inner glow, and from that glow small sounds began to form. Not words, but echoes of laughter, like the warmth left behind by kindness. "These are the blooms of forgetting," the keeper said. "They open only for those who have forgiven themselves." Miria touched one. It dissolved instantly into a silver mist that wrapped around her wrist. Soft and cool, the feeling of being understood without explanation. Deeper in the garden stood a single tree, taller than all others. Its bark shimmered like obsidian veined with dawn. At its roots, streams of light pooled and flowed upward instead of down. Miria approached and placed her palm against it, pulsed once, and her thoughts became sound. She heard herself as the world once did, before names, before fear, before separation. "Do you see it?" the keeper asked. "Yes," Miria whispered. "It dreams of sunrise." "Then you understand," said the keeper. "Even darkness holds the shape of morning." The child looked up, eyes reflecting the silver canopy above them. "Will it ever wake?" "It already has," Miria said. "We're standing inside its dream." The air trembled softly as the keeper raised a hand. "Every dream must return what it borrowed from silence," it said, "and from every flower, every leaf, and every shadow." A single sigh lifted, filling the air with the sound of endings that did not hurt. Time paused, not stopping but bowing. The world exhaled. Miria closed her eyes. The child took her hand. And in that stillness, the garden breathed once more, not to remember, but simply to exist. The garden behind them faded like a song's final note. Its trees bowed as Miria and the child stepped through the gate of light, each leaf dissolving into mist. They followed the river until even the current forgot to move. Ahead stretched a plain of glass. Not ice, not mirror, but something that remembered both. It shimmered softly, reflecting not the sky, but everything that had ever been thought but never spoken. Every step sent gentle ripples outward, as though they were walking upon the mind of creation itself. "Where are we?" the child asked. Miria whispered, "In the place between listening and being heard." The air did not move. There was no wind, no sound, only the awareness of absence. Yet that absence was alive, like a heart beating somewhere beyond reach. Miria felt it beneath her feet, a pulse too vast to belong to any creature, too gentle to belong to a god. It was the rhythm of the first world itself, slumbering, dreaming, unbroken. The child placed a hand upon the ground. "It's warm," she said. Yes, Miria replied, because silence remembers every heartbeat. As they walked farther, shapes began to emerge. Arches of faint light, walls formed from resonant air. It was a hall built from unfinished sound. Here, echoes were born before the voices that would one day create them. Each note hovered, trembling, waiting for a mouth that might exist. Miria closed her eyes, and for a moment she heard them, whispers of futures that had not yet chosen to happen. A lullaby for a child not yet born. A prayer from a civilization still dreaming of its sky. All of them breathing quietly in anticipation. "Why don't they speak?" asked the child. "Because they are still learning to listen," Miria said. "And only when they've listened to everything that has ever been, will they find their first word." The garden behind them faded like a song's final note. Its trees bowed as Miria and the child stepped through the gate of light, each leaf dissolving into mist. They followed the river until even the current forgot to move. Ahead stretched a plain of glass. Not ice, not mirror, but something that remembered both. It shimmered softly, reflecting not the sky, but everything that had ever been thought but never spoken. Every step sent gentle ripples outward, as though they were walking upon the mind of creation itself. "Where are we?" the child asked. Miria whispered, "In the place between listening and being heard." The air did not move. There was no wind, no sound, only the awareness of absence. Yet that absence was alive, like a heart beating somewhere beyond reach. Miria felt it beneath her feet, a pulse too vast to belong to any creature, too gentle to belong to a god. It was the rhythm of the first world itself, slumbering, dreaming, unbroken. The child placed a hand upon the ground. "It's warm," she said. "Yes," Miria replied, because silence remembers every heartbeat. As they walked farther, shapes began to emerge. Arches of faint light, walls formed from resonant air. It was a hall built from unfinished sound. Here, echoes were born before the voices that would one day create them. Each note hovered, trembling, waiting for a mouth that might exist. Miria closed her eyes, and for a moment she heard them, whispers of futures that had not yet chosen to happen. A lullaby for a child not yet born. A prayer from a civilization still dreaming of its sky. All of them breathing quietly in anticipation. "Why don't they speak?" asked the child. "Because they are still learning to listen," Miria said. "And only when they've listened to everything that has ever been, will they find their first word." In the center of the hall stood a sphere of black glass. It floated inches above the ground, turning slowly, endlessly. Miria approached it. Her reflection did not appear upon its surface. Only the faint shimmer of sound without sound, like a heartbeat made of light. As she reached out, the sphere pulsed once. A tone, pure, low, infinite, filled the hall and the world beyond it. The child clutched her chest. "It feels like it's inside me." "It is," said Miria softly. "It's the first sound you ever heard before you had ears." The vibration deepened, and the hall began to breathe. Walls expanded and contracted gently, like the lungs of eternity drawing in its own echo. "Do you hear it?" Miria asked. The child nodded. It sounds like waiting. The tone faded, but something remained. A shimmer across the plain, a rhythm within the air. From it emerged a figure, neither man nor woman, but a shape made entirely of slow, steady light. It did not walk. It swayed, each motion in time with a heartbeat too large to name. Miria bowed her head instinctively. "You are the pulse keeper," she whispered. The being inclined its head. "I am what moves when all else rests," it said. "When time forgets direction, I remind it how to breathe." Its voice was soft, but every syllable caused the world to tremble slightly, as though reality itself was listening carefully. "Why have you come here?" the pulse keeper asked. Miria replied, "To learn how to rest without ending." The pulse keeper smiled, a motion that was more light than gesture. "Then you must learn the silence between heartbeats, for that is where eternity hides." The pulse keeper lifted its hands. Between its palms, a faint spark began to form. "This," it said, "is the first sound ever made." The spark shimmered, not bright, but infinite. A single vibration that contained the memory of all that would follow. Every sigh, every word, every song. "It is not the sound of creation," the being continued. "It is the sound of recognition, when nothing first realized it existed." The spark pulsed faster, and for a moment, Miria could hear the echo of her own heart matching it. The child's eyes widened. "It sounds sad." "It's not sadness," Miria said gently. "It's longing." Even the universe longed to know itself. The pulse keeper lowered its hands, and the spark began to dim, each pulse slower, softer, until only one remained, a final heartbeat suspended in the air. Miria reached out instinctively, but the pulse keeper shook its head. "To hold it would be to end it," it said. "To let it go is to become it." So Miria exhaled, slowly, reverently, and the final tone drifted outward, dissolving into light. The entire plain shimmered once more, and the silence that followed was perfect. The child looked up. "Is it gone?" "No," Miria said. "It has only changed shape. Now it lives inside every pause, every rest, every breath." When they left the hall, the sky had no color. It was not black nor blue, but a deep, breathing nothingness, the kind that could only exist where meaning had already been spoken. Miria walked forward until she could no longer hear her footsteps. They had blended into the world's heartbeat. She smiled faintly. "For all our words," she whispered, "this silence has always been the answer." The child took her hand, and together they stood still, listening not to sound but to its absence. After the hall of echoes unborn, Miria and the child stepped into a meadow lit by nothing and yet not dark. The grass shone faintly as if each blade remembered its own dew. Somewhere far off, a single cricket rehearsed the idea of a note and decided to keep waiting. "The night has forgotten how to end," Miria murmured. "Is that dangerous?" the child asked. "It depends," said Miria, "on how we meet it." They came upon a ridge where small lamps floated at ankle height, drifting like slow fireflies. Each lamp carried a wick that neither dwindled nor grew. "They are kept by those who promise to stay awake," Miria said. But the promise became gentle with time. A figure nodded to them from the slope, an old woman with patient eyes. "We do not watch against," she said. "We watch with." At the meadow's center stood a clock face half buried in clover. It had one hand pointing somewhere between now and now. "Does it tell time?" the child asked. "It teaches it," Miria answered. She placed her palm on the metal rim, and the single hand moved a grain's width. Wind learned to pass more slowly. Breath remembered it could be longer. Down in a shallow valley, trees held fruit that glowed like small moons. The air smelled of cool sweetness and rain that had chosen not to fall. A sign hung from the lowest branch, "For those who cannot sleep, but can rest." Miria took a fruit, split it with her thumbs, and gave the child a half. It tasted like the first moment after someone forgives you. "Why isn't the sun coming?" the child asked. "Because the night has one more thing to show us," Miria said. A narrow footbridge crossed a stream that did not flow. Underneath it, starlight gathered as if the sky had poured its pockets out. As they stepped on, the bridge sang the softest harmony. Not a melody, but a yes. The child matched her steps to the rhythm. Miria matched her breathing. Together they learned the sound a world makes when nobody is pushing it forward. They reached a small house whose door was already open. Inside, chairs faced one another in a loose circle. Blankets waited on the backs. A kettle sat on the hearth, steaming without urgency. People arrived without rushing. A farmer with earth on his sleeves. A sailor whose hands smelled faintly of salt. A teacher carrying an empty bag because she had given away the last pencil. They did not speak much. They practiced presence. When the kettle poured, the tea cooled to the exact temperature a throat needs to tell the truth kindly. An elder began to speak, and the room listened until the walls remembered they were breath. "It was a road," he said, "that kept unrolling just enough to welcome the next step. When I stopped asking where it led me home." He did not finish the story. He placed its last sentence on the table like bread we would share later. The table accepted the task with gratitude. Outside again they climbed a low hill. At its top, youths adjusted the moon by hand with long cords of silk. Not to move it, but to keep it from wobbling in the night's unending yawn. "Do you fear it will fall?" the child asked. "No," one answered. "We fear it will drift too far from listening." They tuned the moon like a drum and bowed to the silence between strokes. A hush drew them eastward, where small flags lined a field. On each a single word: "Please, thanks, stay, enough." Wind read the flags aloud, and the flags believed they had spoken. Miria knelt and pressed her forehead to the ground. The child copied her, then lifted her face with a blade of grass printed there like an inked crescent. "Do prayers end?" she asked. "Only the ones that forget to become practice," Miria said. They entered a grove where the sky opened like a held breath. No star moved. No cloud thought of traveling. Time stood politely by, hat in hand. "Between midnight and dawn," Miria explained, This is the hour that holds what cannot be scheduled: reconciliation, mercy, unproud strength. The child tucked those words into her pockets as if they might wander off without supervision. The brightness from the clearing reappeared at the edge of their path, not blinding, not demanding. A doorway made of respect. It didn't speak. It listened so thoroughly that the silence grew muscles. Miria touched its boundary and felt herself welcomed without being measured. "Will it guide us?" the child whispered. "It will walk at our pace," Miria said, "and stop when we need to remember." The brightness kept them company the way shade does when it understands sunlight. They came upon a slope where people lay on blankets, face to the sky. No one slept. Everyone rested. From them rose one sound: breath, synced by nothing but attention. The bright unseen thinned and spread until it lay over the hill like cool cloth. Miria and the child joined the breath. Within 12 cycles, the night grew taller without becoming heavy. Within 20, grief learned to sit without fidgeting. A dry riverbed split the plain like a part in hair. Stones shone round and clean as if water had just approved of them. At its center, a single boat rested on its keel, ropes trimmed and ready. Miria stepped into it. The child followed. "Isn't a river required?" the child asked. "Sometimes motion is enough," Miria said, and the boat began to travel on stillness, its wake a widening quiet that left rest wherever it passed. They disembarked at a shore made of shoreline itself, layers of arrivals each softer than the last. A bridge arched ahead, woven from the abdicated intentions of 1,000 days. Miria touched the rail. The rail remembered a promise and kept it without fuss. They crossed to the murmur of promises finding their true size. At the bridge's far side, a figure waited, neither tall nor small, neither elderly nor young. Their eyes contained mornings that had chosen not to hurry. "I am Sila," they said. "I teach endings that do not undo beginnings." Sila led them to a bench that had room for 3 truths at once. "Night resists ending," Sila explained. "When day has forgotten how to begin kindly, so we help day remember." "How?" the child asked. "By practicing the kind of ending dawn can live with." Sila placed objects on the bench. A book closed gently, a cup set down without clink, a candle pinched with fingers damp from patience. "These are soft endings," Sila said. "Finish a breath softly, and the next one arrives already welcomed. End a story gently, and it becomes shelter for those who must walk through weather yet." The child ended a breath the way you put a sleeping bird back in its nest. The night approved with a wind that felt like blankets shaken in slow motion. From the plain rose a voice, low and a little ashamed. "I do not end," the night said, "because I was once asked to leave too quickly. I feared I was only a hallway, never a room." Miria stood. "You are a room," she answered, "and a garden, and a harbor. You are where bruises stop rehearsing, and doors learn to rest on their hinges." The night considered this, softened, and loosened its hold on the horizon by the width of a sigh. Sila drew a silver thread from their sleeve and placed it in the child's hands. Fear is this strong, useful, prone to knots, Selah said. Pull slowly. The child tugged with the patience of rain learning a roof. Knots became loops, loops became lines, lines became nothing in particular. Do we keep it? She asked. We weave with it, Selah replied, and showed her how to braid fear with kindness until it formed a cord that could hold a swinging bridge. A bell with no striker hung from a post. Selah breathed toward it. The bell rang, not with sound, but with relief. All alarms should be invitations, Selah said. Miria laughed softly. And all invitations should allow for late arrivals. The bell rang again, and far away, roosters remembered that dawn was not a command but a welcome. They walked to a shallow amphitheater carved from patient stone. Along the rim, lamps faced east and lowered their gaze. In the center, the bright unseen gathered itself into a column thin as a thought. Here dawn practices arriving, Selah said. It rehearses the parts people forget to notice. How light touches roofs it did not build. How it asks permission from dew. How it listens for windows that want to help. The amphitheater filled with the sound of not quite morning. Birds invented the first notes and revised them into silence. A breeze picked up a schedule and chose to leave it behind. Wait, Selah whispered. They waited. Not yet, Selah said. They waited more. Not waiting for, waiting with. When the child grew restless, Miria placed a hand on her back and traveled with her breath to its quietest room. A rectangle of glass lay flush with the earth. Beneath it, roots arranged themselves into script the way branches sometimes write sky. The script read, "This is also light." The child traced the words with a fingertip. Is everything light? She asked. Everything can host it, Miria said. And night is the inn where light sleeps without being watched. Selah turned to them both. Give the night one gift, they said, so it can accept an ending without feeling dismissed. Miria loosened her cloak and spread it on the grass. A map of lullabies stitched from the margins of years. The child placed in its center a small, careful yes. The bright unseen rested on the cloak like a guest who knows they are welcome. The night sighed, deeply, and the horizon lifted like a curtain finding its string. Far to the east, a single bird decided. It sang one note, then rested, as if to confirm it had been allowed. Another answered from a field content to be ordinary. The clocks with one hand between now and now ticked wide enough to become morning. Selah smiled. You see? Endings that do not bruise make beginnings that do not rush. On their return path, the lamps lowered themselves to the height of sleeping. The floating boat moored itself to stillness. The house of late arrivals left the kettle warm, not hot. The field of flags folded itself into shoulders that needed blankets. Miria took the child's hand. When dawn comes, she said, we will have learned how to leave without leaving. How do we do that? The child asked. By letting what we love continue inside us at a pace that keeps it alive, Miria answered. They stood with Selah at the amphitheater's rim as the east softened to pearl. The moonkeepers unhooked their cords and nodded to the ordinary blue. The bright unseen dissolved into the day, not departing, only hidden where kindness stores its light. The night bowed. Miria bowed back. "Thank you," she said, "for not ending until we learned how to end gently." The night smiled the way a closed book smiles when the reader carries its quiet. When the last sigh of night faded, the air turned soft, almost transparent. The horizon did not rise. It simply exhaled, as if remembering how to make room for warmth. Miria and the child stood in the hollow where night had folded its blanket. The sky looked new yet older, a memory of blue seen through the eyes of time itself. "Is this morning?" asked the child. "Not yet," said Miria. "This is the moment when dreams decide what the day will mean." The first bird did not sing. It listened, and the sound of that listening filled the world with something brighter than music. Behind them, the remnants of the endless night gathered into a single figure, a shape made of dusk, hands woven from the last moments of silence. "I have carried their rest as far as I could," said the shadow. "Will they dream again?" asked Miria. "They already are," it replied. "Their dreams are no longer separate. They are the world itself." The shadow looked to the rising light. Its edges began to loosen, dissolving into silver mist. "Where will you go?" the child asked. "Nowhere," said the shadow, smiling faintly. "I'll stay here, in everything that pauses before it shines." And with that it vanished, not gone but distributed, like kindness remembered in the rhythm of breathing. They followed the old path to where the river had once flowed. Now it shimmered like melted glass, the memory of motion made visible. When Miria stepped into it, the water did not splash. It sighed. Each ripple was a heartbeat, returning to the surface from centuries of rest. The child reached down and touched it. "It's warm," she whispered. "It carries yesterday kindly," Miria answered. "The river of morning does not erase the dark. It translates it." They watched as the current bent toward the horizon, its glow spilling into the sky like the first words spoken after forgiveness. At the river's edge stood a mirror of still air. It reflected not their faces, but their essence, the shape of what they were learning to be. Miria looked into it and saw herself holding no burdens, only light, not as possession but as understanding. Beside her, the child's reflection smiled first. It was older, calmer, an echo from a future that already trusted her. "Do you see it?" asked Miria. The child nodded slowly. "It's me, but awake." "Then the world is ready," Miria said. The mirror dissolved into mist, and for a heartbeat, both of them felt the weight of time itself inhale and exhale. A low hum filled the sky. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was the pulse of the first world remembering its own birth. Mountains stirred, not rising, just turning in their sleep. Oceans blinked, and their reflections became sky. Miria placed her hand over her heart. Within it, she felt the echo of everything she had seen. The river that forgot to flow, the night that learned to forgive, the silence that became sound. Each memory glowed faintly, like stars stitched into the lining of her being. The child looked up. Is the world dreaming us, or are we dreaming it? Miria smiled. Yes. A single tone began to rise, not sung, but exhaled by the world itself. Every leaf trembled. Every shadow softened. It was the same tone that once filled the hall of echoes unborn, but now it had learned to be gentle. It no longer reached upward, it spread outward, filling valleys, stones, clouds, and hearts. The child closed her eyes. I know this song, she whispered. It's the one that teaches you to breathe without fear. It's the one that teaches you to breathe without fear. Miria nodded. It's the same song that began everything. Only now, it's remembering how to end beautifully. Far across the horizon, light took the shape of movement, not beings but presences. The gods of the first world stirred from their long sleep, their forms merging with wind, flame, and horizon. They did not return as rulers, but as feelings that people would someday call wonder, mercy, and patience. Each god bowed once to the morning. Each left a fragment of their dream behind, a color, a melody, a single forgiving silence. Miria and the child bowed in return. The air shimmered with something eternal but kind. They've remembered us, said Miria softly. No, said the child, smiling faintly. We've remembered them. When all movement stilled again, Miria turned to the child. What did you learn? The child thought for a long moment. That endings are just breaths we haven't finished taking, she said. Miria's eyes filled with quiet joy. She knelt, resting her forehead against the child's. Then you've learned everything I came to forget. The light around them softened, folding the world into something whole. And then silence. Not emptiness, but fulfillment. The sun rose. Not fast, not slow, perfectly in rhythm with a heart that no longer feared awakening. The sky shimmered, painted by the memories of dreams still fresh enough to be real. The rivers glowed with yesterday's forgiveness. The mountains exhaled in relief. Every living thing seemed to whisper the same truth. Nothing that rests in love ever truly ends. Miria stood at the hilltop, the child beside her, watching the first world open its eyes. Will we dream again? The child asked. Yes, Miria said, but now the dream will know it's dreaming. She closed her eyes. The wind rose warm, clean, eternal, and somewhere, in the soft rhythm between heartbeat and breath, the first world smiled, its final dream turning quietly into dawn.